New legal filings in the Ghislaine Maxwell case has now shown that the Trump administration doesn't really want to produce the names of those third-party co-conspirators after all, not even if they exist in the grand jury records. Let's discuss. I'm Dave Aronberg, former state attorney for Palm Beach County, aka the Florida LawMan, here on Legal AF. Thank you for all your support. Hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. And in a matter that has been discussed and discussed again and again here on Legal AF and other channels, the Ghislaine Maxwell, Jeffrey Epstein matter, here's a new wrinkle. Some new legal filings that show that even if the administration, the Trump administration, gets those grand jury documents from New York, Second Circuit, where it's in front of a federal judge right now, that the Trump administration has no intention of revealing the names of those unindicted co-conspirators. You know, the reason why the MAGA base is so out of their minds is because they've been told for years that there's this Epstein client list, which doesn't exist, but there is an Epstein file, and now they're told the Epstein file is not going to be revealed because you have names of victims and you have names of third parties who they don't want to embarrass necessarily. That's a rule, a traditional rule that is followed by federal prosecutors. Although the thing is, in this matter, Trump came to power along with Kash Patel and Dan Bongino at the FBI, saying that they're going to reveal the names of the client list and the Epstein file. Now they're saying nothing to see here. And in a new filing in the court, when it comes to the issue of the grand jury transcripts, the Trump administration is even admitting that even if they get those transcripts, which is unlikely, but even if they get them, they're going to redact them and prevent the names of these third parties from getting out there. This is not going to satisfy the MAGA base. Of course, getting the grand jury transcripts out in public, even if they weren't redacted, would not satisfy the MAGA base, because the MAGA base has been promised, has been told a lie for years that they were going to get the goods, and the goods would involve a Democratic cabal of sex traffickers, Bill Clinton and Bill Gates. It's like Pizzagate 2.0. This is Hillary Clinton running a sex trafficking ring at a pizza establishment in Virginia. Well, this is Bill Clinton and other Democrats doing this around the world. Of course, that was always a lie. And now the people who promoted this lie are in power and they're stuck. The alligator is always hungry. You can feed it, you can placate it, but eventually it's going to bite your face off. And that's what's happening here. They created this mess. And now the base is not going to be satisfied with a piecemeal offering of a grand jury transcript, especially not a redacted one. They want the names. They want the Democratic names. And they're wondering why the people who promised them that they would expose the elites are now protecting the elites. Well, the reason is, first, there is no client list, but there is a file. And secondly, Trump's name is in the file. And Trump wants to protect himself from being associated with Epstein, even though it's already known. This is the big, bizarre thing, quite frankly. Legal AF audience, I don't get it, quite frankly. This is the part that it's well known that Trump has been friends with Epstein for years. And so to deny it now, to say, well, his name doesn't appear in the file, why? It doesn't mean if your name's in the file that you committed sex trafficking. It doesn't. So why not just come out and just say, here's what we promised. It's a mystery, isn't it? So let's get back to the legal pleadings. These are new. According to the government, which filed a brief, and this brief was filed right after the court said, tell us what you want. Do you want exhibits? Do you want, what's the scope of the grand jury transcripts that you want? And how are you going to protect the privacy of victims and third parties? Well, the government did a memorandum in response to the court's orders of July 22nd, 2025. And this response, recently filed, says the following. The grand jury transcripts contain victim-related and other personal identifying information related to third parties who neither have been charged or alleged to be involved in the crimes with which Epstein and Maxwell were charged. to which the government is sensitive, and which is why the government proposes redacting the transcripts before releasing them. So the joke's on the MAGA base, because even if they get the grand jury transcripts, they're only going to get the redacted version that won't include what they're looking for. So not that this was ever going to satisfy them. They want the Epstein files. And if they don't get that, the piecemeal redacted grand jury records isn't going to satisfy them. And now the government's saying, even if we get them, we're going to redact them and take out the names of those unindicted third-party conspirators that everyone is looking for. Also, it's very unlikely they would get it anyways. You see, there are grand jury secrecy rules in place, and a federal judge in Florida has already ruled you don't get the grand jury transcripts from down there. There's more of a sliver of an opportunity in New York because it's different in the federal courts in New York. They have different rules, and it's a little easier to get it. It's not easy, but just a little easier than it is in Florida. There's at least the door cracked open. But here, even if they get what they're looking for, they're not going to give the public what they're looking for. And so that's what's headed. Now, it also doesn't help that Ghislaine Maxwell herself, you know, the woman who's participating in all this, who's Jeffrey Epstein's accomplice to these horrific activities, even though she was convicted of 5 out of 6 counts and she's sentenced to prison for 2 decades. And she not only was a key part of the sex trafficking conspiracy, but also participated in the sexual abuse herself. Well, the government wants to listen to her now and gave her 2 days of a private audience with the number 2 person at the Department of Justice. And then she was moved to a Faribault facility in Texas. And even she is opposing the government when it comes to the grand jury transcript. She's saying she's got a case pending, that her case is before the Supreme Court. She's trying to get her conviction overturned. And if it's overturned, she could go back to trial. So you can't reveal these grand jury transcripts while her case is pending. She has a decent argument. That's why I think that these transcripts are not going to be released. But I think this is what Trump wanted. It's a shrewd move here, because instead of blaming him and his administration now for a lack of transparency, they can blame the only group of people who the MAGA world hates as much as the media, and that is those unelected judges who wear the black robes and who wield that gavel, have lifetime appointments, even though a lot of these judges were appointed by Trump himself. So that's the play here. The play is to try to move the ire of the MAGA base onto the judiciary, away from the administration, but it's not going to work because the MAGA base wants the files, and the judges aren't impeding the files. They'll impede the grand jury transcripts because that's what the law is. But even if the transcripts are released, and they're not going to be released, they're going to be redacted. And even if they are released in redacted form, they still don't have the information I'm looking for. Even if they're released in complete form, they don't have the information the MAGA base is looking for. So this is a problem of their own making. This is Dr. Frankenstein creating a monster who has run amok. These folks who are obsessed with Jeffrey Epstein believe that there is a group of elites out there, Democrats, who have just committed these horrific crimes, and that anyone who does not release these files is complicit and is part of that group. So there's a problem of their own making, and it's not going away. It's not going away no matter what the courts say on the grand jury transcripts, and it's not going away until a file is released. And that file is not going to be released anytime soon, if ever. Again, it's Donald Trump being hoisted by his own petard. Now, if you don't know that reference, read up on your Hamlet, Shakespeare. And that's the latest here, Legal AF. Thank you for watching. Thank you for your support. Thank you for hitting that subscribe button. I'm Dave Aronberg, a.k.a. the Florida LawMan. And I'll see you next time.
Can't get your fill of Legal AF? Me neither. That's why we formed the Legal AF Substack. Every time we mention something in a hot take, whether it's a court filing or a oral argument, come over to the Substack. You'll find the court filing and the oral argument there, including a daily roundup that I do called, wait for it, Morning AF. What else? All the other contributors from Legal AF are there as well. We got some new reporting. We got interviews. We got ad-free versions of the podcast and hot takes. Where? Legal AF on Substack. Come over now to free subscribe.